Thanks for coming. We got a few extra people here. It's good to see everybody. Our guest today is Michael Wankier. He is the CFO of Larry H. Miller Management Group, and I think most people are familiar with at least some of the Larry H. Miller businesses. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Utah Jazz. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's pretty good. So it's the Utah Jazz. It's the Larry H. Miller dealerships. It's the theaters, the megaplex theaters. It's more than that. It's the Bees. It's the Tour of Utah. They own an advertising agency, the Zone Sports Network. They have a real estate company, insurance, e-gaming league, and Jordan Commons. Those are all part of the Larry H. Miller Group. And Michael is the CFO of the group that oversees all those businesses. So how do you get that job? Well, it begins with a degree at SUU. He's got a master's of accountancy from SUU. He then was an auditor for Arthur Andersen and for KPMG. He then became a controller for Pinnacle Security and DevCom Security. And after that, he was hired at the Larry H. Miller Group. He's also on the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees is the body that oversees this university. So we are very, very lucky to have with us today Michael Wankier.
Thanks, Tyler. Maybe a better question is, who hasn't heard of the Utah Jazz? All right, good. I don't have to give anybody tickets. I'm happy to be here today. As Tyler said, I got a degree in accounting, and so most of you are probably wondering, what does an accountant know about entrepreneurship? So we'll see if I have anything valuable for you today. I hope that I do. I graduated in 2001 with my master's degree, and so the last 17 years have been fantastic for me, and I've learned a lot. So hopefully I have something worthwhile that I can share with you. I'm sure everybody's got their own definition of what an entrepreneur is. There's a lot of ways you can look at entrepreneurism, but I found an article that I really thought kind of summed up what an entrepreneur is. Entrepreneurs know that you have to be both a leader and a manager at different times and for different reasons. Most of the time you're a leader, and eventually you get to a point where you hire a manager. Entrepreneurs practice both finance and accounting. They hire both. Generally, they pay accountants less than they pay finance guys. I take exception to that. We'll talk about that later. Entrepreneurs know that you need sales and marketing. There's always a competition out there in the workplace, it seems, between sales and marketing and everyone trying to determine who's most important. In my experience, the sales guys are the last guys to turn the lights off, so you can't make money if you don't sell anything. Entrepreneurs are the statesmen and stateswomen of business. Stateswoman is an interesting concept to me. It's not a politician. A statesman or a stateswoman is someone who is looking to accomplish the greater good. And so as opposed to trying to figure out what's best for them or what's best for a special interest group, they're looking at society as a whole. They want to make things better for everybody. And it's been my experience that most entrepreneurs are looking at whatever problem they're trying to solve from that same perspective, trying to help everyone as a whole. Entrepreneurs are really trying to learn their trade. They're not just trying to gather information and pass a test. They want to understand really how the business works. What is it that makes the business tick? And that's just a reference on where I got that article. I do want to take exception to accountants getting paid less. Obviously, I worked as an accountant for a long time. But it seems to be the case. So, any accounting majors in here? Keep hope. You can make more money than the other people. You just have to work hard. There's a lot of opportunity out there, but it seems to be every kind of principle in business is valued differently. In the end, they don't know what they're doing without us accountants. So, stay in accounting, finish it. You'll be in good shape. While I was here at SUU, I met the person that has allowed me to be as successful as I have been. My wife Tamet graduated from SUU as well, and I wouldn't be where I am today without her. So she was supposed to be here today. She apologizes. We have 5 kids at home, and the day before Halloween turned out to be a little bit busier than I thought it was. As the one that goes to work every day, not understanding what goes on in the house, it's tough to commit on her behalf for her to come and speak. So she couldn't be here today, but I will say that I would not be where I am today without her. And hopefully this message gets back to her, because I probably don't tell her often enough. So those of you who are married, those of you who are going to get married, that partner in your life is a critical component to being successful as far as I'm concerned. You can do things on your own, but having a partner to help you and support you along the way is a critical piece to success as far as I'm concerned. A little bit further in my backstory, I was born here in Cedar City while my dad was going to SUSC at the time. He graduated the same year I was born, and we lived in several places, but I spent most of the time of my growing up in Delta, Utah. Anybody here from Delta? That's unfortunate. There's a lot of kids from Delta usually come to SUU. Has anybody heard of Delta? All right, perfect. So I graduated from Delta High School. I came here to SUU and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in accounting and then a master's degree in accounting shortly thereafter. This is my family, my number one group of supporters. This was us just a few weeks ago at the homecoming game watching SUU play, but we're proud supporters of SUU. I actually started as a chemistry major. Is there any chemistry majors in here? Any science majors at all? All right, there's a few. You're in a good place. This is a great place to be. Whether you continue down the science path or not, understanding business and the basic concepts of business will help you as you get into your career and whatever it is you decide to do. Ultimately, I got bored in a chemistry class and I decided that it was time to get out. I'd completed about 1.5 years worth of school, so I had to do a little bit of catch up to graduate on the same time frame that I wanted to. But Accounting 101 changed my life, and there's probably very few people in the world that will say that, but for me it changed because I sat in that class and I understood this is kind of the basic language of business. If I understand it, I can figure out what I want to do later. It ended up that accounting stuck, and I stayed in accounting throughout my time in college and throughout my career. As I said before, I got my master's degree in 2001 and just recently joined the board of trustees here at SUU. SUU's been a big part of my life for the last 17 years, and even before that, I guess the last 20 plus years from the time that I started here in school. I started my professional career, as Tyler said, with Arthur Andersen. Those of you that know your history will notice that the year 2001 was a very inauspicious year. Shortly after I started, the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York happened. Shortly after I started, Enron went bankrupt. Working for the firm that was the auditor for Enron was interesting. I wasn't in the same office. I wasn't in the same office that did the work for Enron, but obviously being connected with Andersen, we got communications all the time, and it was an interesting time. I was young and naive, and I knew I needed my paycheck, so I kept going to work, and they kept paying me, and there was always work to do. So that's the other thing for you accountants. There is always work to do in accounting. So when there's a recession, you'll always have a job. As a result of Enron, Arthur Andersen dissolved, and I joined KPMG the spring after I started. So within the span of a year, I worked for 2 different accounting firms. I want to mention here, an important part of my development was having a mentor. Whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're going to go get a job in a different field, having a mentor is an important thing for each of you, and you can have more than one mentor. For me, Larry Ward, he became a partner at Andersen right before the Enron debacle. He then joined KPMG, had to walk away from his partnership interest in Andersen. Later became a partner at KPMG, but he's been someone that I've been able to count on throughout my career. The reason I bring him up is because there will be times as you progress throughout your career where you'll have questions. You'll be uncertain about what it is you want to do. Having a mentor, someone that you can bounce ideas off of, is going to be important for you. Having my wife is also part of that process, so you're going to benefit from having as many people in your life that you can count on and trust, that can help you, guide you as you go throughout your career. For me, I chose public accounting. I'm sure everybody or most of you have heard some of the horror stories about going into public accounting. They're all true. I promise, I lived all of them. But it's worth it. I learned early on that accounting was a great path for me. It fit for me, the way my mind works. Accounting was an excellent path for me to take. But what it really was an investment in my future. Looking back on it, and a little bit at the time, I looked at it similar to the residency that a doctor has to go through. You graduate from medical school and they send you into a hospital, but you still have to complete a residency because they don't trust you to be a doctor by yourself without having some experience. That's a little bit what your first 4 or 5 years in public accounting are. The world as a whole doesn't really trust you to be an accountant just because you have a degree. You need some experience, and that's what public accounting provided for me. Great experience to help develop me as I progressed throughout my career. The other thing that I found in accounting is I could outwork everybody that was at the firm. There might have been people that were smarter than me, but I knew that I could work harder than them, and that goes back to maybe being a small town kid. I understood kind of early on that I can get ahead if I'm willing to work harder than the person next to me. And the reason I bring this up, this doesn't apply just to accounting. I think this applies to whatever trade or whatever business you decide to go into, particularly if you decide to be an entrepreneur. Just because you decide to start your own business doesn't mean that the work is going to go away. You're probably going to work more than somebody who has a 9-to-5 job, but it's going to be more fulfilling. And so the sooner you learn kind of that principle of hard work, the more successful you're going to be. The other great thing that accounting provided for me was exposure to different industries. As Tyler mentioned, I now work for a company that is in a lot of different industries. I see a lot of different things and different problems every day. And my experience as an auditor, going to different client sites in different industries, really developed my ability to quickly learn what happens inside a business, how can I learn from that, and how can I use that either as an auditor or as someone running the company. And again, this last point ties in maybe more to the accounting part of my career and the way my brain works, but we'll talk about this a little bit later. Understanding processes and controls really has come to be something that I've found really beneficial for me, and the training I got in public accounting has really helped me out. After I left public accounting in 2009, I joined the Pinnacle Security Group. Who here has done summer sales, whether it's pest control or security systems or whatever the case may be? Pinnacle Security was one of these companies that did the door-to-door security system sales. They were going through a transition, they were growing, and they needed some help. And so I had an opportunity to join them as their group controller. A couple of years into that experience, they combined with a company called DevCon Security. It was the same private equity group, owned both companies, and we tried to merge the back office functions as much as we could. What I found in that process, going from public accounting and the life of an auditor, was that concept of hard work I mentioned a bit ago doesn't go away. Doesn't matter, for me it didn't matter whether I was in public accounting trying to get audits done or trying to get the monthly books closed at this company. The amount of hard work that was necessary to get those two things done really didn't change that much. There's always something more to learn. I'd spent my life, 7.5 years to that point, my whole career as an auditor. So I understood everything there was, or so I thought everything there was when it came to conducting an audit. What I didn't understand was all the work that happens at the company to prepare the information for me to then audit. I learned very quickly that there was still a lot of work to do, and there's a lot more for me to learn. Any economics majors in here? Couple. I saw Dr. Barry in the hall. He said, good luck. He said, tell a few jokes. He said, make fun of economists if you can, because they're always easy targets. when I took my economics classes here at SUU, I didn't really enjoy them that much. I didn't understand the value in those classes. I really wish somebody had grabbed me and said, these will be very important to you in the future. Pay more attention in your economics classes, because after I left public accounting and had to worry about the day-to-day economics of a business, all those concepts in my economics classes became more real and much more relevant. So if you haven't taken economics classes, do so. You may not enjoy it. It may be painful, but it will be beneficial to you in the future. The other thing I found was your team, regardless of what context it is, your team is only as strong as its weakest link. I went from an environment in public accounting where I worked for a Big 4 firm, started as a Big 5 firm. They hire the best and the brightest. It's a tough process to go through the recruiting to get a job with one of the national firms. What that does is it means that everybody that you're working next to is as smart as you are and as qualified as you are. And so when you leave and you find out that you now are responsible as a controller, I'm responsible for the whole accounting department. I have to train my staff. You learn very quickly that your team is only as strong as its weakest link. You also learn that you have a responsibility to be a leader as much as a manager, going back to the concept of entrepreneurship. You have to lead that group of people on your team more than manage them. They're going to respond much more to you as a leader than they will you as a manager, because a leader is going to be invested in their success just as much as you're invested in your own success. I also learned that it's important to learn from those that were at the company before I got there, or that had other experiences like what I was going through at the time. Again, this goes back to that concept of having a mentor. Someone you can bounce ideas off of, someone you can turn to when you have questions, when you have concerns, or you have things that you need to work through. So all that led up to, I had the chance to join the Larry H. Miller Group in July of 2012. I've been there a little over 6 years now, and it's been an incredible experience. We as a company, this is the Miller family, and collectively kind of going through the principles that Larry believed and organized the business with. They came up with a mission, and that mission is to enrich lives. And I show you this slide because I think it ties in back to the beginning, that concept of an entrepreneur being a statesman. An entrepreneur is someone who cares more about the community as a whole than just their business and the success of their business. And that's really the way the Millers look at their businesses. Larry has a quote that he used several times, but the business is a means to an end. And so there are times in businesses that employees or people do things that you may not want. Unfortunately, we have that happen in our business. We have a hotline to try and take care of that kind of stuff. But I hope as you do business with our company, you find that we care about you as a person more than you as a customer. And we hope that you have a good experience. If you don't have a good experience, I apologize. That's not what we want, and we're going to do our best to deal with customer complaints and issues so that we can make sure that everybody has the best experience they can. That plays into this idea of enriching lives. We're obviously in business to make money, but from personal experience, I've seen the good that the Miller family does with the money that they make, and they really are trying to make everyone in the community better because of their efforts. The vision of our company is to be the best. We want to be the best place in town to work and the best place in town to do business. That's an easy thing to say, and a lot of companies try to do the same thing. We believe that we want every customer, every employee, every person that comes in contact with us to have the best experience possible. And again, doesn't happen all the time, I recognize that, but we sure try our best to make sure that we're a great place to do business. I'll just go back, maybe in the context of entrepreneurship. I think as you look forward and you get out into the business world, it's important to have a mission. Whatever your mission is, it's important to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. It's important to have a vision, the way you want the business to be conducted. That's a great thing about entrepreneurship, is when you as an entrepreneur go down whatever path you choose to go down, you're in control, and you get to drive the car, and you get to decide what happens in the business. It's important to understand what it is you want to happen before you get behind the wheel. So maybe a word of advice as you go forward, make sure you have some vision, some mission, something that you're trying to accomplish, and that will help drive the way you do business. For us, we believe it's important to be a values-based company. These are the values that we teach every employee should be part of their job. Integrity, hard work, stewardship, and service. Again, this goes back to the mission. Our goal is not to just make money and be a successful business, but our goal is to make the community a better place because we're there. Has anybody seen Larry Miller's book, Driven? Couple. It's a really good book. We try and get every employee to read it. Obviously, I don't think everybody gets a chance to read it, but without him being there and alive today, it's really important for us as management of the company and really employees to understand how Larry developed the business. And he had a set of guiding principles that he believed in that we try and pass on to all employees. The first one is to protect the legal, financial, moral well-being of the company. As an auditor, you get a chance to see in certain instances times where employees do not protect the legal, financial, or moral well-being of their company. And so it's a great principle to me that I think applies to all businesses, and it's important to be principle-based. He used to say this a lot: be a student, be a teacher, be a leader. Larry Miller had a photographic memory. He was a genius. Those of you who have read the book will know the story, but he did not do well in high school. And the primary reason for that was the teachers couldn't challenge him enough to make it worth his time to be in the class. That carried on into college. Somebody convinced him, you need to go to college. He sat in his first class and he was bored. He got really frustrated and didn't last much more than a week or 2 weeks in college because he could not be challenged. He really did not enjoy the experience because he was probably as close to a genius as I've heard of. So he went to work, but he never stopped learning. Even though he left college, he never stopped learning. He did everything he could to learn everything about whatever it was he was doing, whether it was running a car dealership, whether it was building the arena where the Jazz play, whether it was starting a finance or an insurance company. These are all things that he had to learn along the way, but he was driven to understand and learn every detail that he could. So for him to use this concept of being a student, being a teacher, being a leader, it really kind of resonates with me because he was the perfect example of someone who was always learning, always teaching, always leading. He used to talk about a three-legged milk stool, and each business was supposed to be set up like a three-legged milk stool. The order of these three things is debated among those that knew Larry and those that are in the company. It used to be make a little money, take care of the customer, have a little fun. It's now been changed, maybe for the good or bad, but have a little fun, make a little money, take care of the customer. If you're doing those three things, you're going to be successful, generally speaking. Again, this is his quote on the business is a means to the end, or a means to an end. And then one of the things that he said late in his life was to go about doing good until there's too much good in the world. Hopefully we can all agree that if that were accomplished, we'd have a lot less problems in business, in communities, if we were all looking to do as much good as we could. The Larry H. Miller Group of companies started with a single Toyota dealership in 1979. Currently, we've got 64 new and used car dealerships across 7 states. It's grown to be a very significant company and a very successful company over a course of coming up on 40 years. We'll celebrate the 40-year anniversary of the car business for the Larry H. Miller Group this coming April. Shortly after starting or buying his first dealership, Larry understood that the extended warranties and maintenance agreements, all those kind of things come along. Those of you who've had experience buying a car know that there's a guy in a desk that tries to sell you everything you can possibly imagine and nothing that you need. We hope that what we're selling is useful, but in the end, when you're buying a used car in particular, it's nice to have a little bit of assurance that there's some extended warranty or something that can help you out if something goes wrong. When Larry bought his first dealership, he was selling somebody else's insurance product, somebody else's service contract. He learned very quickly, I might as well sell that myself. So he created an insurance company that sells those service contracts and maintenance agreements. Again, we hope that it adds value, and we hope our salesmen aren't pushing stuff onto people that they shouldn't have, but unfortunately, I know it happens. Car dealerships are car dealerships. Doesn't matter where they are. We use the term car guys. Those of you who know car salesmen, there is an absolute stereotype, and it fits most of the time. Shortly after that, I guess about 5 years later, Larry bought half of the Jazz. And this is a really interesting story in Larry's book. He used what was called a Texas option. Has anybody heard of a Texas option? So he bought the first half of the Jazz with a Texas option to buy the second half of the Jazz. The way a Texas option works is whoever decides to exercise the option gets to pick the price that the other half of the business will be sold for. The other person then gets to decide whether they're going to be the buyer or the seller. So it's a really interesting type of agreement. I don't think they happen very often, but Larry was one of those kind of guys. And so he put this into the contract. A year later, the other half owner of the Jazz said, I've got somebody that wants to buy the price or wants to buy the team in whole. I'll buy your half from you and then I'll sell it to them. Larry said, well, what's the price? So this other guy, exercising his option, set the price. Larry then decided, I'm going to be the buyer, not you. And so it was a really interesting thing, but it shows a really good principle. Larry understood that doing business with somebody needed to be as open and honest and upfront as possible. This guy was trying to get rid of the Jazz, which Larry enjoyed having the Jazz. He thought it was important for the Jazz to stay in Utah, and he wanted them to stay in Utah. So he knew he was probably paying a little bit more than what the Jazz were worth at the time, but he also knew because of the way that option worked, he had the ability to control the transaction. He leveraged everything he had and bought the Jazz at maybe a little higher price than would have been the market value at the time. But as a result, it's been a great thing for the state of Utah, particularly for the Salt Lake Valley, to have the Jazz there. And it's very recognizable. It's one of the few professional teams out there that is identified by the state and not the city. So we're happy to have the Jazz. The family loves this asset and has taken steps to ensure that the Jazz won't leave Utah unless something really dramatic happens. It's not impossible, but it's really difficult for the Jazz to leave the state of Utah going forward. And we love that, those of us that live here in the state, and we appreciate the sacrifice that the family made almost 30 years ago, more than 30 years, 35 years ago, to keep the Jazz in Utah. When Larry acquired the Jazz, they were playing in the Salt Palace. You guys are probably mostly too young to even remember what the Salt Palace used to be. It still exists. They do conventions in there, but that used to be where the Jazz played. It was necessary to build a new building, and Larry'd never worked on a real estate project to this scale. But if we go back to those guiding principles, he was always willing to learn. And so he jumped in and basically acted as the general contractor. He'd never worked in the real estate business in his life, but he jumped in to be the general contractor because he wanted that building to be perfect. He wanted it to be his vision and not somebody else's vision for the building. The interesting thing about that, and the reason that is important, is we just did a renovation on the arena a year and a half ago. And when all of the architects and the engineers came in to evaluate what can and can't be done to the building, they said this was the best designed building they'd ever worked in, because it was designed in a timeless manner. It was designed to live forever. And a lot of that was because of the vision that Larry had. He knew what he wanted, and he did the homework to understand what it was going to take for that business to last for forever. It's a building that's built specifically for basketball. Those of you who've been there for a game, the seats rise a little bit steeper than you have at some other arenas. And so it's a great home court advantage for the team because it's built specifically to be a basketball arena and have the crowd on top of the team as much as possible. A few years later, again, this connects to the car business, but Larry started a company called Prestige Finance. This is a subprime auto financing company. This is a company that provides loans to people that can't get them through conventional loans at the bank. We charge high rates. There's no way to get around that. But our team there really tries to run the business from a credit rehabilitation standpoint. We'll take people that have gone through bankruptcies, who can't get a loan anywhere else. We'll help them rehabilitate their credit. And our goal is for them to refinance the loan and leave. Go get a loan somewhere else because they've done what was necessary to rehabilitate their credit so that they can get a conventional loan somewhere. It's grown since 1994 to be a $1 billion portfolio of loans. It's a really big company. It's not as flashy as the movie theaters or the jazz, but it's a really successful and really important part of the Larry H. Miller Group of companies. Tyler mentioned real estate. We have a real estate company. It manages real estate assets of approximately $800 billion in fair market value. Most of those are automotive assets, but there's some office buildings and a couple of the movie theaters that we manage as well. It's a really important part of business. It really doesn't matter. I mean, we're seeing more online businesses grow out of the ground, and more people are turning to online businesses. But there still seems to be a lot of components to business that require real estate. And so real estate's an important component of what we do as a group of companies. In 1997, this is a great story. It was either the state or the city. Somebody came to Larry and said, we've got this old Jordan High School. Anybody from Jordan? Anybody go to Jordan High School? Anybody from the area, Sandy, West Jordan? So a long time ago, Jordan High School is run down. They've got the money to build a new building. They came to Larry and said, we've got an old building here. We've got a piece of property. We need some help. So he got on a council and they tried to come up with ways that they could use that building or they could use that real estate. They came back to him and said, no, we want you to come up with a way to help generate sales tax. So his ideas were residential opportunities. But in the end, he came up with the idea to start the Megaplex movie theater chain. He built a corporate office right next to it. But it wasn't really until halfway through or 3/4 of the way through the project that Larry then started asking the question, how do I get movies to show in my movie theater? So he was a true entrepreneur from the standpoint of he was willing to take a risk. He was willing to jump in and do what was required for the community, even if he didn't know everything that he needed to know at the time. He quickly learned what the process is for getting movies to rent, to then exhibit on a movie screen. And that's turned to be a very successful business. We're just in Utah. There's about 16 locations across the state. We've got one here in Cedar City. Hopefully they take care of you when you guys want to go to the movie. A little bit later, he bought the minor league baseball team in Salt Lake. At the time, it was the Salt Lake Stingers. It's now called the Salt Lake Bees. The reason it's called the Salt Lake Bees is that's what the team was when Larry was a kid growing up. He would go to games. He actually played fast pitch softball. He was a very, very good pitcher. Played on a traveling team, a professional fast pitch softball team. So he loved softball, baseball, and so this was with owning the Jazz and having that part of the entertainment market in Salt Lake City, this was a great fit for the group. I'd like to tell you that everything that the Larry H. Miller Group does was successful. We've got a few cases where it's not. And I think the reason that I bring these up is not to highlight what went wrong necessarily, but to point out that you're going to have adversity. You're going to have failures in your life. It's okay. Not everybody is successful at everything that they do. The important thing is that you need to learn from those experiences, whatever they may be and whatever context they might be. Owning the Jazz, you sell a lot of jerseys in the arena. Larry thought this was a great type of business. We can sell the jerseys in malls and other places, and it really was pretty successful for a while. The problem was that business grew too big, maybe too fast, and it is an interesting market. Everybody's got their favorite team. It may not be the local team. But in Utah, we've got the Jazz, and we're a mix of everything. So in Utah, you can stock your store with 49ers, Broncos, Raiders, Cowboys. You can have quite a variety. That model doesn't work when you buy a store in Philadelphia. Who here is from out of state? What are some of the places you guys are from? California? Southern California?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you a fan of the Giants or the Warriors or... Okay, so I can't sell a Golden State Warrior. I can probably sell a few Golden State Warriors in Los Angeles. Most of what we sell is going to be Lakers. What's another city? Seattle. Are you a Seahawks fan? Are you a Raiders fan? No. I can't sell a Raiders jersey in Seattle. The NFL is the predominant player in sports-based retail. Basketball is probably second. But it's interesting. We got into this business. In Utah, you need a mix of everything because we've got a mix of everything other than the Jazz when you look at basketball. This is a really tough business. There's a company out there called Fanatics. Anybody heard of Fanatics? They are swallowing every company in this space right now. And so we reached a point where it didn't make sense for us to run the business anymore. So we had to sell it. Anybody watch K-Jazz TV? Long time ago, before the internet existed, there was only one place you could go to watch Jazz games. That was K-Jazz TV. ESPN didn't have a contract. There wasn't games that you could see in the local market without the K-Jazz television channel. It was a great buy at the time. It was a great business for a long time. But our entertainment consumption has changed. You can watch NBA games on an app on your phone. You can watch them on a computer. ESPN pays a bunch of money every year to show, TNT pays a bunch of money every year to show NBA games. So it's this business just got swallowed by overall consolidation. We ended up having to sell that because we had to take advantage of more money in other ways to sell the Jazz rights. Anybody heard of the Miller Motorsports Park? This one may be a little bit less known, but those of you that like racing, Larry was, obviously being in car dealerships, Larry was at a really avid he was a car guy. I guess there's no only way. He loved cars. He had a collection of Ford Cobras. It's what race cars used to be in the 30s and 40s. He had this collection of cars and he wanted to drive them. He didn't want them to just sit around, so he had the idea to build a racetrack. Originally, it was a racetrack for him. It was a place where he could go use his cars. Through that process of developing the track, he decided, let's try and make this a business. I have other friends that are interested in cars and racing. It's a tough business. It just didn't work. We ended up having to walk away from that asset because it just didn't make sense financially. We couldn't make it work. So there's other businesses, maybe less notable, but we learned from each of these experiences. And it's important that when you reach adversity or you meet adversity, you learn from those experiences and find ways to overcome them. Since I've been at the Larry H. Miller Group, there's a few things that exist or learnings that we have within the group that we believe are important. In any business, cash is king. I'm not sure I understood this when I was coming out of college as an accountant. I was taught that I needed to understand the financial statements and you got to follow all the GAAP accounting rules. In the end, none of that stuff matters if you're not generating positive cash flow. So it's important to understand what is the cash needs, what are the cash sources of your business when you become an entrepreneur. Larry always valued the team around him. I talked a little bit about him being a genius, and he was, but when he put a team together to work on a project, he valued the input from everyone on the team. And so it's an important thing, even though it may be your business, it may be your idea, it's important to recognize and seek input from others, particularly when you put a team around a specific project. I didn't understand the importance of this concept of the entrepreneurial spirit until I joined the Larry H. Miller Group. These are kind of old numbers, but there's 29.5 million small businesses according to the 2010 census. And I think they define small business as less than 500 employees. Firms with 100 employees or less are 98% of employer firms in the United States. This is an important segment of society, the concept of the small business. Entrepreneurs drive that in a lot of ways. So those of you that are seeking to be entrepreneurs are an important part of keeping our economy and the way business works in America healthy. And then Larry knew the importance of giving back. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but it's important in whatever venture you go in your life, it's important to give back. A couple of things here, I'll kind of skip through these quickly. I think it's important to have a set of values. I talked about that earlier. Values that I think apply to entrepreneurship or integrity, compassion. You have to have a drive to achieve because nobody else is going to do it for you. You need to be loyal to those around you that help contribute to your success, and it's important to have a passion for what it is that you're doing. Most of the entrepreneurs that I meet are people who have a passion for what it is that they're doing. And this is an interesting concept. I don't use this in a religious context, but it's important to make mistakes. It's important to correct those mistakes, and it's important to move on. And so it doesn't matter what kind of aspect of your life. I think that's an important value that we acknowledge when we make mistakes, we fix them as best we can, and then we don't look back, we just move forward. With that said, we've got a little bit of time left. Anybody have any questions that I can answer?
I'll ask. So, as I understand that as he was paying off the jazz, I guess the question is, did he start some of these other businesses in order to keep the jazz afloat, or was it just he was just a guy who was starting businesses no matter what?
He was a guy who was starting businesses no matter what. He leveraged what he had at the time with the banks. He had really good partners at the banks, and he leveraged what he had to buy the jazz. But in his mind, it was always, we have to keep growing, we have to keep expanding, we have to keep doing new things. And when he had an idea, he kept doing it for that purpose. Not the jazz. I mean, it helped pay for the jazz along the way, but in the end, he did what he did in starting businesses because he thought there was a need. It was a need he thought he could fill, and he thought he could be successful doing it. Go ahead.
So Larry H. Miller Group has a lot of different companies.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a diverse portfolio. So I was wondering, what's the future of the company and what direction are you heading? What industries are you looking at?
So that's a great question. We're going to stay in auto for a long time. We're really... Everybody here have a car? Everybody here willing to give their car away or give up their car? Okay, so it's going to come. But the car business is going to change. It's going to evolve. We're going to evolve with it. We think we'll be part of the car business. But entertainment is something that we've found we're pretty good at. We're going to stay in the entertainment space in whatever capacity we can. But we are looking at other opportunities. I probably shouldn't say specifically because we're actually in the middle of a couple of acquisition opportunity kind of due diligence processes right now. But we're looking at industries that fit what we know. We know how to take care of the customer. We know how to manage relationships with vendors like car manufacturers who have a specific set of guidelines that they want us to follow. We know how to manage cash flow. And so businesses that require competent management of cash flow, those kind of industries are things that we would look at. Great question.
As far as doing good as an entrepreneur, obviously Larry H. Miller Group has had an opportunity to serve all of Utah and do a lot of good things. Maybe just to help all of us understand ways that we could do good as entrepreneurs, what are some things that the Larry H. Miller Group is doing both for employees or for the community in the ways that they're serving?
Great question. So first of all, there's a family foundation that they've set up. Not everybody has the means to set up a family foundation, but that's been passed on to all of us employees. We have a group called Larry H. Miller Charities that's separate from the family foundation. And that's an opportunity that we have employees have an opportunity to give money every month, and it goes into a pool, and then we as employees get to help decide what needs in the community need to be addressed. So what charities are there that we can take those funds that we as employees have accumulated, and how can we use those in the community? there's an annual day of service every year that we do on Larry's birthday. Every year, every employee of the company has an opportunity to go out and do a service project in the community where they're located. So it doesn't matter which state we're operating in, Arizona, Utah, California, New Mexico, Colorado, whatever it is. They find a need in that community, whether it's a community center or whatever the case may be, and they organize a service project and everybody spends the day paid by the company to go and complete that service project. In addition to that, all of our dealerships do drives for socks and coats and school supplies and other things that they then take, and they'll do a drive every year at the beginning of school. They'll take those supplies and give them to the local schools. So there's a lot of opportunities like that. And those are things that any entrepreneur can take advantage of or that you can do. I mean, that's the great part about this concept of being an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial spirit. You find a problem and you then go find a solution. So I think anybody at any time, if you see a problem, you can collaborate with those around you and find a solution for it.
So we're about out of time. I'd just like to say one last thing. I think I mentioned this on the first day of class, which is that this fabulous building that we have is built primarily through private donations, and one of the largest donations that we received, in addition to the Levitt family, is from the Miller Family Foundation. So we're especially grateful to them for that and for this building. And so I'd also like to thank Michael for taking the day and spending it with us. And so in recognition of that, I would like to present him with the Thunderbird Award.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.